I'm poet and writer Case Spivey, and today I wanted to talk about something that is kind of different from my usual content, but maybe not that different. I did the video on what is solar punk because I think that is the coolest. I haven't seen nearly enough solar punk, that's all I'm saying. We're still at the point, I haven't seen nearly enough, it is not mainstream enough, we need more solar punk because I think it's a great literary movement. I've been watching some different videos of people talking about eco-grief. I wanted to talk about that and kind of my background with environmentalism as a whole, because I don't really come off like someone who is pretty environmentally conscious, I don't think, and yet to me it's not really a part of my identity per se, because it's sort of always been a part of my life. And I just wanted to talk about that and like my own kind of experience with eco-grief, because I think it's something it's important to talk about. I didn't realize that this was kind of as big a thing as it is, and it was really interesting for me to hear from other people who do identify as environmentalists or who are scientists or who just are really environmentally conscious now in their older life. And so many of them came into this understanding a bit later in life. And I wanted to talk about, for me, because I didn't have like an environmentalist awakening or anything like that. I didn't watch An Inconvenient Truth and then suddenly realize what was going on. Actually, when I watched An Inconvenient Truth, I was shocked and awed and was like, okay, here's the things we need to do and like the way we need to change the world. And my mom was basically like, we already recycle heavily. We already go and do trash cleanups. Like, we just did one probably not that long ago at that point when we watched it. We already are as environmentally conscious as a household can be, as a normal middle class working family can possibly be. It's just like, the issue isn't with us. Like, we already put our effort towards environmentalism. That was kind of the wake up for me, where it was like, you can only do so much, and then the rest of it is kind of in changing the way the whole population of the world thinks, which is, you know, the biggest part, but it's because there's a lot of things you can't do. And let's just talk about what eco-grief is before I just jump all over the place. I'm just gonna be talking, but so eco-grief, it has to do with environmentalism and the fact that it can be very overwhelming when you finally are shown like what the actual picture of the state of the earth is, that we're at sort of a point where there's not really a lot of coming back from it, that we have gone so far into polluting our world, and just the perpetual snowball effect of the things that we are doing is so great, and the actual measurable destruction is so huge. It can be very overwhelming. You can look at all these things and you can look at all the things that you are then doing that are part of the problem, or that maybe aren't even a big part of the problem, but even a little part of the problem. Like, remember when everyone was freaking out about plastic straws? That is a piece of this huge puzzle of things going on. Like, yes, there are plastic straws in our oceans, but there are also, you know, entire plastic boats. There are pieces of balloon, there are tarps, there are bottles of all kind. There's so much trash that taking this one thing and just you not using a straw one time, it's negligible. However, it's not a bad thing to suddenly be like, I'm not using plastic straws. It creates a good snowball effect. If nobody is using plastic straws, maybe next nobody is buying bottled water. You know, it's one of those things that they do stack over time. More people being more aware of the things that they're doing on an individual level eventually creates enough money loss for these big companies that they will try and adapt. Unfortunately, the way that they tend to adapt, because capitalism, is to try and demand more of our money back, to try and be like, oh no, we're on your side, buy this other thing that's slightly better but still just as bad. They try and pull you in with that. But every slightly better is a win. The problem is, it's not enough of a win. The idea of tackling all of these big problems that are going to affect you, that are going to affect your children, they're going to affect whether or not in 100 years there's still a livable planet for us, it can be overwhelming, and it can cause a lot of grief. It can cause a type of anxiety and depression in many people, especially if you're coming into it for the very first time and you're seeing the actual measurable numbers for the first time. It's a lot. It's it is overwhelming, and that's what eco grief is all about. People being like, well, I'm not going to continue to contribute to the destruction, so I'm going to, you know, like go vegan, go all natural, all of these things. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying it's not the direction I really went. And again, it's because I grew up into this. So background on me, my parents both met and got married at the Grand Canyon. My dad has been a park ranger. Professional life has been doing park service or working with the Forest Service. My mom was a science teacher. And so the science and the environmentalism was already baked into my parents. When we took family vacations when I was younger, we went to national parks, we went to museums, we went to zoos, we stopped at all of the talks when they were talking about the effect on the environment and like what people can do, all of those kinds of like clean up the world talks. We stopped and listened to all of those. I just grew up, that was just what we did. If we were going to do something fun, it was also somewhat educational. We were going hiking or we were doing the junior ranger programs. For the most part, because my family was just a working class family, my mom cooked at home. And she's a vegetarian, and my mom has just always been a vegetarian her whole life. And so even though the rest of us ate meat, mostly we didn't eat meat at home. We ate some, and it wasn't like a weird thing. It wasn't something that was like made a big deal. Like she didn't not make us meat. She didn't force us to be vegetarian. She had 3 kids growing up who she needed to feed. Like we ate what we wanted to. We just also ate a ton of meals that weren't meat. I didn't even know people ate spaghetti with meat in it until I was much older. And first time I had meat sauce spaghetti, I was like, this is so good, I'm never going back. A few years after that, I thought I kind of miss having tofu in my spaghetti. And I know you think that sounds gross, and my husband thinks that sounds gross because he's like, okay, Italian food should not have tofu in it. But I love it! I loved it! Having just cubes of tofu in our spaghetti was like, that was what we did. I ate a lot plant-based growing up without really it being a big deal. We would go and do, you know, community cleanups where just everyone's got a bag and some gloves and we're just cleaning up the trash in this area. And that was just something we did. Like I said before, my mom had pointed out to me, we recycle heavily. My dad was the type to, you know, go through the trash before throwing it out to make sure there are no extra recyclables in there so that those got sorted properly. My family just sort of always did all we could. I mean, when An Inconvenient Truth came out, we rented that and watched it. I grew up watching films like Fern Gully that now people will cite as being an environmentally conscious film. That was just something I enjoyed watching growing up. Like a lot of this was just internalized, and I think that is probably the best way to handle it, to just be brought up in all of this, to have it coming at you piece by piece, little by little, to sort of see everything all together so you don't have that panic moment where you're like, well, I'm not doing enough, I need to do more. I came to sort of understand there is only so much I as one person sitting here can do, and I can do as much as I can, absolutely. Like, don't stop yourself from doing as much as you can, but the bigger picture is pushing people with more power to do more. And as my generation is growing up and taking over businesses, like, oh, we're not yet, the boomers haven't moved out, but once they get going, my generation, the millennials, will be growing up and taking over businesses. And if we're coming at it from an environmental perspective, that we grew up being like, you need to recycle your paper goods, you need to turn off the lights when you leave the room, you need to do this, this, this. Us coming into that and taking over these corporations and implementing new rules to those effects, that's important. And unfortunately, that's going a lot slower than it needed to go. And thus, we're at a point where we're really at a breaking point. It is scary, but at the same time, you have to hold on hope and also not be so down on yourself. And I'm not gonna get preachy here. This is more about my own experience. I keep jumping around, but let me talk a little bit more about my background, because like I said, my dad worked for the National Park Service. Technically my mom did too. She taught at the high school at Grand Canyon, so she's also working for Park Service. What my dad did specifically before he retired was he did the air traffic overflight. Basically, it was controlling the noise and pollution so that everyone at the canyon could have a natural and good experience. But a lot of that had to do with negotiating with people like who wanted to fly helicopters for commercial trips of the Grand Canyon. Great business thing, but at the same time, not good for the noise and for the pollution. And so him trying to negotiate with people, or like they built a factory that they had to prove that the pollution from the factory that was, you know, many miles away was affecting the air at Grand Canyon. He had to be instrumental in proving that that was true, so that they had to have more regulations over there in order to not affect the national park's airspace. The amount of work that the national park rangers, that the scientists at national parks are doing to help with the environment is amazing. If you ever look at a map of the spaces that are the least deforested, best air quality in the United States of America, those are national parks. And I'm gonna be honest, it's like only where the national parks are. And so I've always been really proud that my family is national park people, that we've been on the side of science. Like, we went to museums as the fun thing that my mom would take us to do, not to go to the movies. I mean, like, we did not go to the movies, and it wasn't like a weird thing where we were like, oh, so we weren't a hippie family, but we just were conscious of the environment and of things that could be proven. I feel like some of the eco-grief comes from looking at the numbers all together all at once, but there are a lot of breakdowns too. Like, it's not one thing that's happening, it's many little things that are happening. And there are many people trying their absolute best to work against it. And there are many avenues for you to be one of those people trying hard to work against the waves that are coming, like the destruction we've already caused. People trying not only to prevent further destruction, but trying to heal the destruction that has already happened. One of the best resources would be go to the national parks. I understand we're still in COVID right now, but again, science, the vaccine is coming. Hopefully by this time next year, we'll be able to go out safely. And you know, the national parks are one of those places you can go safely. People are gonna be flocking to them, especially in the summer. So be careful. If they say, you know, there's too many people here, you have to respect that. Like, respect people who are trying to do their job to keep you specifically safe and everyone around you safe and everyone around them safe. Right now, there aren't as many like interpretive opportunities, but when there are, again, listen to the interp rangers, listen to the people running these programs, the Leave No Trace programs. It's really important to learn and understand what Leave No Trace means at the national parks and how that can be applied to your home life. Just cleaning up the trash around you, it does make a difference, and people see the difference. And the more people who see the difference and who try a little bit harder, it does have an effect. But also, these people at the national parks, if you help to sponsor them, donate to them, pay when you enter the park, pay for any kind of permits that you need in any of those spaces, that helps them to be able to do their job to keep the spaces around the parks as clean and safe as possible. The scientists need funding. The whole thing about science is they need money to do science, and the money has to come from people who care. And the people who care in the circumstance of the national parks has to be the people coming to the parks. And so by going to the national parks, you're helping to sponsor the scientists who are learning about the destruction that may have already happened in that area, may be happening currently, and to help not only to stop it from getting worse, but to try to heal things that have already happened, to try and make things better. You can look into the wolves' reintroduction into Yellowstone, the condors being reintroduced to the Grand Canyon. You could look at plant species that only live in specific areas that are being protected. There are just so many things. The deforestation, how national parks have been instrumental in kind of understanding how important the forests are and how keeping the forest healthy is important. There's so many individual things you can look into, and it's so many things that are probably specific to your area that are completely different if you're down at the Grand Canyon than they are up here at Mount Rainier. There are different things that need to be done at different parks, and there are different things that are more important in some areas than others. Some areas have drought, some areas don't have drought. We're all still affected by the change in the climate. We're all still affected by the swings in the atmosphere, where we have these sudden bizarro freezes that didn't used to happen, when we have much hotter, drier summers than we used to have. Even if it's not a drought, it still affects everything. It still affects the whole climate. And these are things that the national parks are equipped to teach you about. and are equipped to hire you to help them teach other people about or to actually make a difference. And I just wanted to talk about that there are avenues. If you are panicking because eco grief has got you down, because you're seeing the state of the world and it just seems like too much, there are people doing their best and you can help support them. There are other avenues. I just want to advocate for the National Park Service because it's something that I deeply believe in. It's something that my husband is also a park ranger. My camera just died. But I'm going to go ahead and leave some links down below to some resources if you're kind of new to environmentalism, if you're kind of new to the whole concept of eco-grief. I'm going to leave some resources that you can check out down below. But mostly the thing you need to keep in mind if you are kind of in this mindset is you can help and there is help. If the only thing you can do is to get out and vote, that's really important as well. Voting for legislators who are going to have the world's best interests at heart, your best interests at heart, is very important. So don't forget when the ballots come back around. Just because we won the last presidential election doesn't mean that is the end. That's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope you are having a good day, and I will speak to you very soon. Good luck to you and good luck to all of us. Bye.